G'day you mob, and welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Although today we'll be taking a little adventure into the Scottish Highlands and Lowlands to talk about survival in the Scottish wilderness. So today my special guest is Tom Langhorne, and Tom Langhorne has a channel on YouTube called Fandabi, right? Fandabi space Dozi. The link will be in the transcript and on the site, but go and check out his channel. It's really interesting. He does a lot of stuff about surviving in the wilderness of Scotland. Right, so there is some crazy stuff that you can learn on his channel about surviving there. We talk also about history and culture in Scotland. We talk about the Gaelic language, right? The language that was there before they were invaded by England and started speaking English. They actually spoke Gaelic. But yeah, it's a really interesting episode, guys. I know you're going to get a lot out of it. Something different, and also you're going to have a challenge with the Scottish accent. So Tom, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, mate. I really appreciate it. Smack the bird. Let's get going. G'day guys, welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today I have Tom here from the YouTube channel Dozi. Did I say it right? Dozi?
Dozi, yeah, that's close.
Man, so I literally found Tom yesterday and I've dragged him onto the podcast because he's going to be the first Scottish person on the podcast. So congrats, Tom. Is that a Glasgow accent, can I ask as well?
Well, I'm probably going to disappoint people because my accent's not very strong. I've lived in Scotland all my life, but, you know, Scotland's got a huge range of different accents, you know, quite different to the ones you see in movies and stuff. So, yeah, I live near Glasgow, so my accent's probably a wee bit influenced by that, but, you know, compared to a true Glaswegian, my voice, my accent's quite a bit softer.
So they'd hear you and be like, nah, man, nah, he's not the real deal.
Yeah, they would probably tell that I'm from the area, but if I said I was Glaswegian, I would probably get a lot of abuse.
Far out, man. So can you tell me about your channel and how it got started? So you have this amazing channel. I'll let you explain it. But
so I like lots of things. It was completely by accident. I started the channel, I think I put the first video up in like 2012 or something, and it was just when the GoPro 2 had just come out, you know, the wee nifty action cameras. I was just going and filming wee adventures of that, and I named Fandabi is actually a catchphrase from this sort of 80s Scottish children's TV show. It was like this really cringy sort of past, but I named it that because it was a running joke with a friend, but I named it that because I wasn't planning to actually make it into a YouTube channel that people would start watching things.
And what did it mean? What did it mean originally?
It doesn't really mean anything. It's sort of I could send you the song. If you type Fandabi Dozi, it will come up with my channel, but it'll also come up with the song from the Crankies. It's like Fandabi Dozi, Fandabi Dozi.
So it's kind of like that Yabba Dabba Doo or whatever from the Flintstones.
Something like that.
Something they say.
It means like everything's good, everything's fantastic. It's something like that.
Got it. Like fabulous.
Kind of, it was one of those things. And then I started making videos more regularly. People started following me and knowing me by the name, and then I feel like it's too late to change it. So,
it gets to that point, doesn't it? There's a guy I watch on YouTube called, I think, Sargon of Akkad, that I watch sometimes, and he has this thing, and he's like, man, it was just a gaming name that I had once upon a time, and now it's just stuck with me. I can't just actually use my real name.
Exactly. I think it happens to a lot of YouTubers. But so I've always been interested in bushcraft and wilderness living skills and stuff like that. So I did my first kind of trip. I went out for a couple of days and, you know, slept under a rock and ate shellfish and ate a dead deer that I found and stuff like that, and made like a sort of light-hearted video about it, and people watched it, so I made another one. I just kept on going, and then, you know, people asked me to teach them, and then moved on to the Highlander stuff, which is what is kind of taken on taken off recently. Looking at
that was what I saw for the first time, the Highlander stuff. What made you decide, obviously from doing the survival skills stuff and going out into the bush and surviving, what made you decide to sort of narrow it in on the Highlander people? And you have it from a specific range, right? From the 1600s to the late 1800s?
Yeah, so again, so what got me firstly interested was my sister is fluent in Gaelic, so that was the original language of the Highlands. It's still spoken today, but only by a very small percentage. And I think we were just talking about the use of the plaid, the plaidir, the big kilt. And, I was sort of, because I was really interested in camping and kind of, I really like the simplicity of old school camping gear when it's just like a wool blanket and just like a knife and that. I really loved trying that out in the wilderness. And she just mentioned how people used to, take it off and sleep in it, and how they could turn it into an anorak and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's like pretty cool. And then the more that I looked into that time period, there's just huge wealth of stories. There's a huge wealth of knowledge about the plants, and just lots of real and mythologic. What's the word? Legendary characters that could kind of go out into the wilderness and survive off the land. Just wearing their kilt and a knife and a little pouch of oats and stuff. So I just thought, oh, that's a cool sort of area to focus on. And I think it was just like a sort of right sort of timing, because people are interested in that time period with like Outlander and other TV shows. So it seemed to kind of tap into an interest that was already out there that I sort of didn't really expect.
Well, and tell us, what is the Highlands, or what are the Highlands like, right? Because you have Scotland's kind of divided into these two sections, right? The lowlands and the Highlands being the mountains, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. So there's a couple definitions. There's an actual fault line. So there's a geographical fault line that's actually, it starts not far from me. I think it's sort of near Loch Lomond, and it kind of cuts diagonally up Scotland up to sort of near Aberdeen. And so that's the actual like fault line. But then I guess the sort of Highlands that a lot of people think of it was the heartland of the Gaelic language during the sort of 17th century. So that is, sort of just north of Glasgow, sort of quite close to that fault line, but going all the way up. So people generally refer to that as the Highlands.
Far out. And so is that where the accents tend to get stronger as well in the Highlands? Because, you always... And Game of Thrones is probably the best kind of analogy to give most people who don't know much about Britain, Great Britain. The accents tend to get stronger the further north you go, right, through England all the way into Scotland, at least, broadly speaking. Is that the same within Scotland itself, that the lowland areas will have a sort of softer accent, and then the further north you go, the stronger it gets?
I wouldn't say quite as simple as that. I would say there's just a big difference. So the Glaswegian accent, tourists that come to Glasgow will they'll think people are speaking German or something, so that you can get very, very thick Glaswegian accents.
There's a video I've seen of that guy standing on the roof, and he's a worker, and his mates are giving him a hard time, throwing stuff at him and trying to tell him to get down off the roof. And they're telling him, have you seen it? Where he's like, put your foot in the flashing, put your foot in the flashing. And he's like, I can't put my foot in the fuck. And he just loses it. And you're like, is this even English? This is just like another language. And they have to have subtitles on, but it's just like, it's just phenomenal, because he just loses it for like 2 minutes and you just go blank. So it's not as simple as that, though.
Yeah, not as simple. And then you've got... if you go up towards the Aberdeen area, there's a dialect called Doric that's actually has got Norse influences.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of for example, they call children bairns.
I've
heard that.
Yeah.
And bairns is, I can't remember, it's very close to like Norwegian for children is like bairn or barn or something.
Barn. I'm actually learning it on Duolingo at the moment. And
there you go.
I'm a boy,
There's a barn.
Yeah, exactly, Barton. But so that's
Okay, so
yeah, far
yeah,
out.
so there's influences of that, and then the very North Islands have got a different accent, and the Western Islands have got a different accent. But now, with modern days, everyone's mixing up, and
Yeah,
Edinburgh has got the stereotype of being a bit posher, and the
Yeah.
accent's not as strong, a bit more
well,
English.
my sort of exposure to that growing up was always Billy Connolly ripping into
Aye.
well anyone and everyone, but he was always a Glaswegian, obviously, with his accent. And I remember sitting there as a kid with my dad. My dad loved him, or still does, and I would always be like, "What is a weigh-in like?" And he'd be like,
Weigh-in,
"Oh,
yeah.
like a young child or something," and then
Aye.
a jawby, and like all of these like slang terms. And I was just like, it took me years of growing up with watching Billy Connolly to finally understand the Scottish accent. How do you find it with foreigners that come to Scotland? Do they have a really hard time kind of making their way around, or they sort of click pretty quickly?
I think most of the time they find it pretty difficult. Usually, people are quite happy to find me because my accent's fairly very understandable compared to other people. But I can sort of act like a translator because I can understand people's strong accents, so I can sort of be a sort of middle ground for people. But I think some people, find it pretty difficult,
So going back to the
especially in Glasgow.
Going back to the Highlanders, how did they survive in the Highlands, which is a pretty inhospitable place, right? It's very cold. There's lots of water, snow, rain, sleet, everything like that. How did they survive if the average guy back then just had a kilt and, some woolen blankets? Is it when you started doing this and the survival stuff, did you sort of appreciate that it was incredibly difficult, but at the same time it was, you could do it?
Yeah, I mean, it was one I learned, still kind of learning as I go along what it was like. But they were definitely very tough people. So the Highlands have changed quite a lot in terms of the landscape and the amount of forests and stuff. But yeah, it was still pretty hard climate to be in, especially if you're trying to grow crops. And the main kind of economy was around cattle. So that was there was lots of cool stories of people stealing each other's cattle and kind of running through the mountains and sleeping out and stuff. So yeah, there are definitely very tough people, but you can see that that it is possible. It's just lowering your kind of comfort level, basically. Like, as long as you're keeping your core body temperature warm enough, that's kind of it. As long as you're keeping your core temperature warm enough so you don't die, then it's not comfortable, but you can see that it was definitely possible.
So is that why you guys, or Scottish people in general, especially the Highlanders, always have that that stereotype of being incredibly tough, incredibly strong, right? Like, even on The Simpsons, you've got Willie, who's he's just like shredded with a kilt everywhere, but like he's the one that always goes in and deals with anything that's dangerous, or he fights the bears or whatever it is. So is that where it originally comes from? Like, obviously having to be an incredibly tough group of people to survive in those conditions.
Yeah, I think so. So some of it, could have just been romanticized from Victorians and stuff. But compared to like the rest of Britain, up until the Jacobites were defeated and that kind of the sort of British industrial society kind of took over the Highlands and the Gaelic culture.
Yep.
They were definitely their culture hadn't changed for sort of 400 years. It was sort of a little pocket of unchanged culture that was, people, and every lad would have been trained to be a warrior. So it's just like, compared to the other societies, which were sort of changing into more industrialized societies, the Highlanders were still sort of stuck into their way of life, and they were very, very fierce warriors, and they were always fighting each other, and they're incredibly tough. So I think there is truth to that kind of, especially that sort of time period. And then when Jacobites were defeated, and that's when a lot of people lots of Scots went to Australia or America or something during the Highland clearances, but a lot of them joined the British Army, and they made Highland regiments, and they were considered amazing warriors because they'd been fighting from the age of 10 years old, so they didn't really need to be trained. So they just go in the army, and they turned out to be amazing soldiers.
This sounds like the sort of Maoris, right, or the Polynesians, where as a people they tend to be just huge because the tribes have been warring each other for thousands of years or whatever, and there's just no small people left. That kind of blew my mind when I was looking into that, and there was that, there's always been that rivalry between England and Scotland, right? At what point in time did that kind of finally sort of quell down? Was that after this period is that the mid 1800s when that started happening?
So the Jacobites were defeated in 1746, 1745. That was the last. That was the sort of, they had a series of uprisings. I would say there still is tension between Scotland and England, but the actual last war, you could say, was then. But again, it wasn't really. It was people sort of think of it as Scotland versus England, but it was more Highland. A number of Highland clans mixed with Spanish mercenaries and stuff fighting against the British colonials, you could say. So a lot of the redcoats that were fighting were Lowland Scots. So it's typical, like very, very complex politics and stuff. So not necessarily Scotland v England, but people sort of it seems like it's that in movies.
Yeah, it seems like it's such a crazy, complicated history. I mean, I was looking into it, and I remember watching, again, Game of Thrones and seeing the Red Wedding, and I take it you know what that's based on, right, in the history of Scotland. Is it the Glencoe Massacre and the Black...
Oh, okay.
Or is it the Black Dinner? Do you know those two stories from Scotland?
I know the Glencoe Massacre. I don't know Game of Thrones very well, I'm afraid. So
that's all right. Sorry. So anyway, there's this effectively a scene where these people they're about to marry one of the daughters off to this guy's kids, and then the guy effectively has the guards come in and massacre everyone in the family.
Oh, right.
And it was the funny thing. The reason I kind of liked Game of Thrones was because a lot of pretty much all of his stories were taken from real life, and so it leads you down that path of learning about these things. And the Glencoe Massacre, right, was where you had two families or two clans, right? One was meant to be on the other one's land, or being the guest of that group, and the other group just massacred them, even though they had the law of hospitality, right, at the time, where you weren't meant to kill anyone who was living under your roof or you were meant to be giving shelter to.
So I'm not like an absolute expert on it, but as far as I'm aware, so yeah, there was a big culture of hospitality in the Highlands, and that was partly because people needed it to do it to survive when people were traveling around, and so it's not very comfortable sleeping out in your plaid in the pouring rain every night. So people would just knock on each other's doors, and it was accustomed to let people in and give them food, even if they were like turns out it was your enemy. You still it was honourable to still take them in and feed them. It was quite.
And was that issue that you don't want to be the one who says, nah, we're not taking you in? Because then if you're ever in need, everyone's going to be like, sorry, champ, you're on your own.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So as far as I'm aware, it was to do with the Glencoe Massacre. Could be wrong, but this what I'm aware of, it was this, basically the British government had told the Highland clans to sign a peace treaty.
Yeah.
To sign up and say like, oh, you're with us or against us, and the chief of the MacDonald clan was actually on his way to sign the treaty, but he either got the wrong place. I think he was going to Fort William when he was meant to go to Edinburgh. I can't remember where he was meant to go, but he went to the wrong place. So he was on his way to sign to say like, oh, we're with you, we're not going to fight against you. But basically, because he didn't sign it in time, then the British government were like, right, he's against us. And there happened to be the MacDonalds were housing a regiment of redcoats, and redcoats got a message to say, oh, these guys are actually against you, so kill them. And then there was also this, I think, a lot of those redcoats, something to do with the Campbells again. There was some clan rivalry within that. But there was this kind of mishap, this mistake of not getting to this place in time to sign this agreement. And then there was a big massacre in Glencoe. And
Far out. Yeah, it is. I was watching something and it was talking about how I think in the 1300s Robert the Bruce escaped and went and got shelter with the Campbells because they were having a feud with the Douglases or something who were fighting for England or something like that, right? And and that led to this, big thing. And I think that got taken, that story got taken and put in Braveheart, the film, right? Where it was like in reality the timelines are like totally different or something. But
yeah. Braveheart's like way off.
But I remember seeing Braveheart for the first time and seeing just how kind of brutal life looked like in the Highlands there, and that you had these like no trees or at least very limited forest cover. Has the forest been gone for a very long time in the Highlands?
So no, not really. So it's quite an interesting story with the forest. So it used to be, like all of Britain, absolutely covered in forest. And I think actually, the name Caledonia?
Yeah.
I think it has some reference to like forested place in Latin or something like that. So yeah, there was still a lot of forest, but yeah, through the ages, it slowly cut down, and then as when the Highlands were cleared, a lot of it, as far as I'm aware, were cut down to fuel kind of iron smelts and different mines, and then the sort of when people were cleared off the land, the sort of a feudal system appeared, and wealthy people had big estates, and they wanted a lot of deer for their friends to come shoot, and they wanted lots of sheep for the wool industry. So they put as many sheep and deer as they could on the land, which stops any trees rejuvenating. And then with the British building their oak ships, I think a lot of the oak forest went during that sort of 1800s, and then the First and Second World War. I think the First World War took a lot of trees as well.
Oh, no kidding!
For the war effort. So you have like lots and lots of big events that's taking away the trees, and then because there's so much sheep and there's so many deer, there's not any rejuvenation. So there's only like 1 or 2% of that old forest left in Scotland.
Far out. So it was actually everywhere, was it, originally up in the mountains and everything, and now the sort of scene that we get to see where you just have, it looks like Iceland, right, where it's just a lot of these grass hills with rocky outcrops and everything. So that was actually very uncommon back then, and only happened more recently where it was just totally cleared.
Yeah, so yeah, it was a slow process, but yeah, it's definitely not a natural looking landscape. So it's you'll notice if you see these say like Glencoe, these famous pictures of Scotland with the big, open expanse moors, you'll notice that all the trees that you do see are either on islands or on cliffs where the deer and sheep can't get them.
No kidding.
So if you think like if a tree can grow out of that little cliff with like hardly any soil, then obviously like it could grow everywhere else. It's just it can't because there's so many herbivores to not allow that to.
Is that the problem today as well? They still have farms there, do they, with heaps and heaps of sheep and everything that's compacting the soil or eating the trees as they grow?
Yeah. So another thing. The deer population is way higher than it should naturally because of this. They're sort of bred for people to come hunt.
And they have also, no predators, right? There's no wolves, there's no bears, because they're all gone.
Exactly. The last wolf was shot in 17-something. Bears were killed out in the Romans. So yeah, there's no predators. And also, during the sort of period of the Highlands that I was looking at, cattle, there was a lot of cattle, less sheep, less deer, but cattle graze the ground differently. They're more selective of what plants to eat.
Okay.
They're not as, they can't...
it's not just a blitzkrieg of just take everything that's green.
Yeah, exactly. So they would have created more biodiversity because they're more selective with their grazing, and deer are not. But it's a big topic in Scotland, and there is organisations that are replanting the forest and either shooting lots of deer or putting up deer fences to try and let the forest rejuvenate. There's organisations like Trees for Life, and there's an estate in Glenfeshie which is he's trying to rewild it. So he's shooting as many deer as he can, and he's planting lots and lots of trees to try and get it back.
So do you think that's feasible? It's something that's going to eventually happen where there'll hopefully be a heap more native vegetation and forests back in Scotland and even England?
I would love for that to happen. It needs to happen very gradually and with all these sort of these land users in mind, because obviously they're like the shooting industry is big in Scotland, but I mean, in my opinion, if you look at say the red deer that you see in Norway and stuff, like red deer have evolved to live in forests.
Yeah.
And if you look at red deer in Norway, they're huge and they've got like massive antlers, lots and lots of prongs. And if you compare that to your big stag in Scotland, it's really scrawny and it's got like its antlers are not as impressive because there isn't enough food for that. There's too many deer.
Yeah.
There isn't enough to really fatten them up. So I think it would be nice to bring back this forest, but still, you can still have your shooting industry, but you just have less deer, but the deer that you do have are bigger and healthier, and so I think the changes are happening, but just like everything in modern life, very, very slowly. Changes are happening.
That's so interesting because it's a sort of analogous thing happening in Australia with kangaroos, though, the problem, where there's 2 kangaroos for every person in Australia, and it's because the land was clear, and that's just the one species, the grey kangaroo, right?
Great, okay.
So we came in and if, like Scotland, except way more recently, have just totally cleared all the forests and turned it into farmland, and the kangaroos go nuts. They go bananas because they're insane breeders. They can have like 3 babies at different stages at any one time, but they have to go in and kill them because if there's too many of them in one location, aside from competing with the sheep and the cattle on these farms, they eat everything and they starve to death because there's just too many of them. So they can't get big. They're all emaciated. So it is funny when you get rid of those big predators, and there's obviously people encouraging, more of this animal, that it becomes a serious problem. So for that, going back to Highlanders, did they have to, on average, know how to survive because of the conditions up there and the sort of lack of, I don't know, what I assume was good roads and buildings and everything like that too? Like, did the average Highlander compared to a Lowlander, obviously going up and down this crazy environment in these mountains and everything, they had to have these kinds of skills and have them sharpened to be able to survive?
So I don't. My knowledge on the lowlands of that period, I don't know as much, so I can't really compare them. But what I do know, the Highlanders during the 17th century is, they would have obviously spent a lot more time outside when clans were fighting each other or stealing each other's cattle. There was a sort of fierce or very strong warrior culture. There's a really good book called School of the Moon that talks a lot about this.
Yep.
And it's basically people, different clans, sneaking through the mountains at night, stealing other people's cattle and like sneaking them back through the mountains at night and kind of sleeping out in the glades and living off the land and, fighting each other in the mountains. And there's also a big... so if the cattle was the main economy, they didn't really have money. So to sell them to different markets, they would have to be driven. And until General Wade's roads, there wasn't any real roads in the Highlands. So for hundreds of years, there was a huge industry of people driving cattle, right from the Hebrides, like small islands on the coast. They would swim cattle across to the mainland. It's crazy stories. And drive the cattle down to markets in Falkirk and Edinburgh, or sometimes all the way to England. And drovers, they were called drovers, the people that did that. And those guys were incredibly tough. So they're, swimming their cattle across the ocean, moving their cattle. And then, there was inns and there was options to stay at people's houses, but to protect your cattle from people nicking them, it's best to sleep right next to them. With your dogs, they would usually have big dogs to help protect the cattle as well. So most of the time, they're just wrapped up in their plaids and wool blankets, sleeping out, keeping an eye on the cattle, get up, move them another sort of 10 to 15 miles, do the same again. And if a rival clan tries to steal it, you have to fight them off, and so yeah, those guys were tough, and that's the sort of like with my series, I don't want to romanticize this type of history because obviously it was tough, and we don't really want to go back to it, but it's those skills, the knowledge of the medicinal plants, and the culture was much deeper in terms of the mythology and the stories of the land, and the beliefs and the different magic and the different powers and the different spirits of the land and stuff. So that's what I would quite like to reconnect with and kind of regenerate that sort of knowledge.
So what was the average kit that they had with them too, and what kind of skills did the average Highlander require when going through the mountains in order to survive? Because I saw one of your videos where you sort of laid out all the different I think there were 5 or so different objects that they tend to have with them. What did they need? They needed to be able to make fire, find shelter. What other kinds of things did they have to be able to do?
So in that video I was looking at what they carried and relating it to a kind of modern survival concept, but yeah, so they would have. So obviously the plaid, the pladger, the great kilt was this sort of one of their main kind of ways of shelter and sleeping in. They would have carried some extra wool blankets, some sort of cutting tool. So ski and do, it's a famous knife. And
can you explain again what does that mean again? The ski and the do, the Gaelic words, right?
Yeah, skiing is knife, and do is generally it means black or dark, and so some people believe ski and do, the name, it's either do is either because the handle was made from a black oak, or do means something dark, like dark deeds. It's like a hidden knife. So yeah, it could have come from different meanings. A dirk, which is a big dagger, that was the main weapon, 17th century. Maybe later on they might have, if you're protecting your cattle, say if you were a drover driving your cattle hundreds of miles, maybe you would have a bow and arrow, maybe you'd have a pistol. If you were rich enough, you would have a sword.
So that's the thing, right? Any metal was very expensive back then, right? So it wasn't like every man had a shield and a sword and could just run around willy-nilly.
Yeah, I think, that's what I believe. So that you would, the sort of maybe the average or the poorer person, wouldn't have all the armor and all the swords and the shields and all that stuff. And then oats were the main thing, the main kind of stable carbohydrate. But people would have carried, butter or different, like a black pudding, dried meats, dried fish, depending where you're from.
Haggis?
Scotland, from. Haggis, I don't know if you would have carried it, but yeah, you would have. Apparently, people would make black pudding on the move. So it's basically you bleed your cow. So you would get a cow and you would cut a small hole in its neck.
That blew my mind when you were saying that. Yeah, you take the blood from the cow and you can mix it with your oats, and obviously it's a higher protein food. And I think I'd only ever seen, is it the Maasai in Africa or whatever, doing that with mixing it with milk and urine and everything. And I was like, what? The Scots did this?
Yeah, well, it must just be if your main economy is with cattle, like the Maasai is. It's obviously just a very useful way.
Well, and it's the same thing for them, right? They have their main economy is literally cattle. They don't have money, they have cattle.
Exactly,
so it's amazing to see those sort of two cultural practices in completely different locations in the world, right?
Yeah, I've thought about doing a video comparing them, because even if you look at the Maasai's dress, it's like a big blanket that's checkered.
You're right. No kidding. No kidding.
It's weird, eh?
Yeah, but I think they'd probably have a harder time living in the Highlands than the Highlanders would having living in Africa, although they might get a bit more sunburnt, right?
Yeah. At least we don't have lions and stuff to deal with.
Were there any other really surprising things that you learnt that... Because I can imagine if I went into learning about even Indigenous culture in Australia or the first settlers in Australia, I am sure there would be things where I'd be like, how on earth did they do that? How on earth did they overcome these barriers and survive in this way, right? Because you get that romanticized kind of idea of, they just lived off the land, right? No problem, easy peasy. But when you go out there and you learn how to do it and everything firsthand and you're researching it, were there things that you were just like, these guys, like, how on earth did they survive, off a handful of different foods for years at a time?
Yeah, I guess the main thing is just we're so spoiled in modern day that we can go to the supermarket and buy anything we want, and our diet is so high in carbohydrate and sugars and stuff, which just, yeah. I mean, the time period 17th century is not that long ago, but people definitely didn't have all that stuff.
Yeah.
So just even just going out for 2 or 3 days and changing your diet to eating some oats and some stuff that you find. You can feel like very, very low in energy because your body is used to, I'm used to eating bread and pasta and these really high energy stuff that you can just stuff in your face 3 times a day. And even 2 or 3 days, your body is kind of not getting used to that. I'm planning to do a longer trip where I would, eat these things and for longer, and then maybe my body will kind of get used to it more. But yeah,
fatten up first. Do a binge.
Fatten up first.
3 months. 3 months of junk food, and then then you'll be like, yeah, she's sweet.
Yeah.
I just drank water. I survived fine. I just water, and it was like a month, and it was all good. Survived off the land. Box ticked.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, lots of the more I research about it, there's hundreds of things. Just the general discomfort that someone would experience in just living in, the wee houses that they would have lived in winter. They would have shared it with their cattle.
Yeah, no kidding. For the sake of warmth, or to protect the cattle as well?
Probably both. You might have had a divide, but yeah, sharing your house with a few cows, that's going to be pretty smelly and pretty dirty. But also like a big cow that's going to give off a lot of heat, so it kind of makes sense to share your house with that in the winter.
You got these portable heaters. So
exactly.
Before we finish up, can you tell me a bit more about Gaelic? How did your sister learn Gaelic to fluency? Because I know, obviously, in Ireland there's a big push, but even then, I think you've got, what is it, like a small percentage, 200,000 people or something who speak it, and that's not even as a native language. It's even smaller in Scotland, right? But you guys have Gaelic, and that originally came from Ireland, right?
Aye. So, yeah, my knowledge of it going way back, I don't know so much. But yeah, Gaelic, some people say Gaelic or Gaelic, some people it's slightly different.
Yeah, sorry, that's my pronunciation, so I'm not sure. I just know Gaelic football.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's okay.
And don't say Gaelic to the Irish, right? If you said to the Irish, they'd be like, it's Irish. It's not Gaelic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, very, very similar. And yeah, the Gaelic culture, it's still, there's a big push to regenerate it in Scotland. Yeah, a very, very small percentage of people actually do it. My sister got into it just because we all went on holiday in the Highlands, and she was really interested in the stories of the land. So she just went to university and learned it, and then went to a Gaelic college on the Isle of Skye. And then that's how she became fluent. And she's got lots of friends who are sort of native speakers. So yeah, so I am terrible at learning languages. I find it very, very difficult to learn, and the Gaelic that I have learned is to do with plants.
Yep.
Because I'm trained in biology, that's what I did at university. So I can somehow stick that in my mind okay, because I like plants and I know stuff about plants, so I can sort of glue those words in my head. But I'm trying to learn more. General.
It must be so difficult though when it's not in your face, right? Because it is an endangered language there, I believe, right? Like there's only, is it 90,000 people who speak any of it, let alone fluently in Scotland. So it's a tiny, tiny percentage, which is a real shame because it is. Mm-hmm. I remember growing up and thinking, Great Britain, yeah, English, that's where English is from. They all speak English and they have for thousands of years. And then you realize that there are so many of these other dialects that are completely different and based on Gaelic languages, right, originally, that aren't necessarily from English or related to English, and that there are totally different cultures there. You've got Cornish and Manx and everything like that as well.
Yeah, so you have the sort of, I think they're generally called the sort of Celtic languages. So yeah, the Cornish and the Welsh and the Irish Gaelic and Scots Gaelic, and then you have the Doric, as I said, influenced by Norse. So yeah, huge variety. Unfortunately, it is so rare.
The thing that blew my mind too about Celtic languages is that I think when you look at the family tree of those languages, they go back to split with Germanic, I think, and they actually originated on the mainland of Europe and spread across. And so when the Romans and everything, before the Romans sort of spread west, all of those languages throughout there were Germanic and Celtic, and that's why there's still that language, and I forgot the name of it, in France, right?
Brittany.
Yeah. Breton, that's it. Breton,
is that it?
Yeah, which is a Celtic language. And it's just like, it's so
Crazy.
funny hearing about like that. Yeah, it's language that's obviously spoken in Scotland now, effectively originated from a language that would have been spoken in Europe. But yeah, don't give up, man. You gotta get on there, learn some, tie it in with the Highlander culture.
I'll try my best. So that's the way I'm learning it is through doing this series. My girlfriend's French as well, and I'm trying to learn French, but it's very difficult.
Man, I'll have to
it
have
feels
a chat.
like
I'll have to have a chat with you
as soon as I
afterwards.
put a word in, another word pops out the other side.
The good thing with French, though, man, is that 70% of the words in English are French, so you'll recognize it. That's the sort of cheat. When I was learning French,
true, yeah.
It's sort of like you just have to be like, this is the French pronunciation, and then you just sort of, every time you don't know a word, you kind of just use the English and put a bit of a French twist on it. And 70% of the time, you're just like, nailed it.
Yeah, that's what I usually do.
So what's the future plan for the YouTube channel? What's next?
So I am kind of this year is it's kind of gained popularity in the last few months, and I just finished my my summer job, or finished my job a few months ago. So I'm kind of like, I want to invest lots more time in it and kind of see where it takes me. And people have already asked me to teach some sort of Highland bushcraft courses. So I've got a few gigs coming up this year.
Oh wow, brilliant!
So yeah, for videos, I'm gonna keep up the Highlander stuff, tie in lots of the Gaelic knowledge, the mythology of the plants, do more survival trips and planning. So when I'm talking about the drovers, I want to try find an old route that they did in the Highlands and follow it for a few days, carrying the equipment and food that they would have had. So lots of ideas, and then I want to tie that eventually into broader things to do with rejuvenating culture, rejuvenating humans' connection with nature, and how that can be beneficial to our health and well-being. So yeah, that's maybe a longer term plan, but definitely within the next few months, lots and lots more videos about Highlanders.
Oh, brilliant. And so where can everyone come and find out more about you and watch some of these videos?
So the YouTube channel is called Fandabidozi.
How do you spell it?
Fandabidozi, Fandabidozi.
Gotcha.
I had to write it down. That's how bad I am with languages.
Oh, good.
You can follow me on Instagram. It's called Fandabi Wilderness. Got a Facebook page, Fandabi Dozy Wilderness Adventures, and you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, I'll put all the links in the transcript. And again, Tom, thank you so much for joining me.
Cool. Thanks so much.